What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be doing yet another hero guide, this time focusing on arguably the most powerful character in all of Star Wars canon, Emperor Palpatine. Now, Palpatine's playstyle honestly hasn't changed dramatically since launch, even with multiple nerfs and even being deleted from the game at one point for being too powerful, but I still wanted to redo this hero guide since you guys all seem to love seeing those stats on the side of the screen, and Palpatine in particular is probably one of the characters that has the most need-to-know stats in the game. If you haven't seen my latest hero guides, then I will leave a link on screen at the end of the video, as well as a card up in the top right of your screen, so make sure to go and check those ones out as well. With that out of the way though, we are going to go ahead and get stuck right into it. So we're going to start off with his base stats, and like I mentioned in all of these hero guides, all of these stats have been double checked by both myself and one of my subscribers, and there will be a link in the description where you can find his Reddit post with all of these stats. Now, we both tested these in arcade, and while I'm 99% sure all of these stats do transfer over to multiplayer, just bear in mind that there is always a chance that some stats may change from arcade to multiplayer, so if you do see any stats that don't seem right, then definitely feel free to let me know down in the comments. So first off, we're going to take a look at his base HP, and he does have a pretty decent health pool coming in at 700, which is a little lower than most of the other Force users in the game. However, it is also still higher than almost every Blaster hero too, so it's pretty much smack bang in the middle of all the dark side characters. On top of that, he has 250 health regen, which is up there with most of the Saber users in the game, so overall he actually does fairly well in terms of his health. His weapon of choice is his Force Lightning, which does add a very unique playstyle compared to anyone else in the game, as he's almost an in-between of a Blaster user and a Saber user in terms of the distance at which he deals the most damage. His Force Lightning can be used with either one hand or two hands by holding either one or two triggers, which apparently not a lot of people actually know, so hopefully that tip alone may help some of you out, as I know it definitely did in my older hero guides. With one hand he will deal only 50 damage per second, and then with two hands he will double that with 100 damage per second, and all of this can be done at sort of a close to maybe medium range, although that is definitely being generous. Now, as for his stamina, this will also drain at a different speed depending on whether you use one or two hands to attack. Using only one hand, you'll drain your stamina from full in 14 seconds, and then with two hands, you'll drain it from full in 7 seconds. Now, moving on to his abilities, and overall, I would say his abilities are pretty well rounded. Overall, nothing really special, but they all do serve a very good purpose. His L1 ability is his Chain Lightning, and I'd probably say that this is his best ability, and with the right star cards, this does actually turn into arguably one of the best abilities in the whole game. Plus, with a 15-second cooldown, that does make it even better as well. It deals 120 damage to each enemy that it hits, and it can also bounce to multiple enemies, meaning if you hit one person and he has 2 or 3 of his squad mates nearby, then it can actually bounce along to them too, even around corners too, which does make it deadly on areas like the Naboo hallways or the Juggernauts on Kashyyyk, for example. This ability is super useful for quickly damaging large groups of enemies at once without any chance of being avoided, either setting them up for an easy finish or even sometimes finishing already injured enemies too. Its only downfall is that it will leave you unable to attack for roughly 1 second after each use, so it's definitely best to try and deal some damage to enemies first and then use it to finish them off rather than the other way around. Moving on to his L1R1 ability, which is his Dark Aura, and this one actually has a slightly longer cooldown coming in at 25 seconds. This is a continuous area of effect ability, meaning while it's active it will keep on damaging enemies within the area of effect as well as slowing anyone down, although it only deals 15 damage per second within the 8-second active time. This ability is really useful at slowing down and damaging a whole room full of enemies at once, sending them all into a panic and usually making it a little easier for you to take them out one by one with less resistance. The only downside is that the activation animation will leave you fairly vulnerable, as the animation is fairly long. Moving on to the R1 ability, which is his Electrocute ability, and this is essentially just a regular stun ability that will stun anyone in place, leaving them unable to move at all for exactly 1 second, and this one does have a 20-second cooldown, which isn't actually too bad for a stun based ability. This ability is handy at stunning a whole heap of enemies at once, and then combining that with your regular attack and following that up with a Chain Lightning attack, you can take out large groups within just a matter of seconds. Its only downside is that it can be blocked and dodged, as well as the fact that it does have a pretty slow animation which can leave you vulnerable as well. Not only that, but of all the stuns in the game, I believe this has the shortest stun time too, so it's still not bad by any means, but it is noticeably shorter than most others in the game. So that is it for all of his base stats and abilities. Now we're going to move on to some of the more important stuff, starting with his best star cards for Galactic Assault. Obviously it really does come down to personal preference, so these definitely aren't the only cards that you can use, but these are just the 3 or 4 cards that I think are the most important and most well suited cards for Galactic Assault. So the first card I'm going to recommend is his Lightning Absorption card, which is arguably the best health card in the game, and how this works is that rather than being a health on kill card, it'll actually give you up to 25 health per enemy hit with the Chain Lightning ability. So you don't actually even need to get a single kill with the Chain Lightning ability, and you can still quickly gain back anywhere from 25 to 100 HP depending on how many enemies you hit. So this is definitely a must-have card for Palpatine. The next card I'd recommend using is the Surge of Lightning card, and this one will actually go hand in hand with the last card that I mentioned, giving you up to an added 4 possible enemies that the Chain Lightning can bounce to. If you can use this ability in some really close quarters areas and choke points, that's a possible extra 100 HP on top of the health that you would have already gained with the first card. So on maps like Naboo and the Death Star, for example, these two cards together can just about give you unlimited health if you do use the stun as often as possible. Now the third card is going to come down to 2 other cards that you guys can pick and choose from, or even just use both of these and replace one of the cards that I have just mentioned. The first card worth mentioning is the In Full Control card, and this will reduce the stamina drain on Palpatine's regular lightning attacks. This is definitely handy to use if you find yourself running out of stamina with Palps. However, if that is not the case, then you can also replace it with his Lightning Reach card instead. This card will pretty much just extend the range of his lightning attacks, which I find to be really useful on maps like Sheik or Endor, where there are some slightly more open areas. So honestly, between these two cards, you can easily switch it up from map to map, using the added stamina on maps like the Death Star, and then the added range on any maps with some more open areas. Now again, these are just the cards that I personally think are the most useful. However, he does also have some other pretty handy cards as well, so I'd still recommend to test them all out for yourselves and try and figure out which ones suit you the best. Although the ones I have mentioned are just a good place to start if you're not too sure what to choose. So now moving on to some of the best maps to choose Palpatine on when you're playing Galactic Assault, and the top 3 that I've picked are Naboo, the Death Star and Tatooine. All of these maps really suit his close quarters aggressive playstyle due to the tight areas and abundance of choke points, and they also allow for a lot of areas where enemies pile up, leaving plenty of opportunities for some easy health regeneration with his Chain Lightning ability. Now obviously this doesn't mean that these are the only 3 maps that you should choose him on, but these are just my 3 personal favourite maps that I think suit his playstyle very well. Now moving on to some tips for Galactic Assault, and the main tip I have for Palpatine is pretty much just to play as aggressively as you can without necessarily getting straight into the objective rooms or choke points, rather by trying to push enemies back and then head into those areas instead. Palpatine can make such quick work of enemy troopers, however on the other hand he can also be taken down so quickly due to the fact that he doesn't really have any form of defense at all. Because of that, you don't want to full on rush into areas like you would with a saber user, rather trying to draw a few enemies to you first and then finish them off, and then head into the more dangerous areas once you know it's a little safer and less populated with enemies. The thing with Palpatine is that he can struggle at times pushing into such heavily defended areas without any help from his teammates. However, once he does get into those objectives and choke points, it's almost impossible for the enemy team to take them back. He is so good at locking down areas once he does have full control, and especially with the help of a few teammates, he can arguably be one of the best defensive characters in the game when it comes to playing the objective. His ability to just slightly damage anyone in his area and then follow up with a Chain Lightning attack to not only finish the group of enemies off at once, but also gain back some health in just a few seconds is pretty much unstoppable in those close quarters areas, and especially on maps like Tatooine where he can get on the rooftops. Sometimes he genuinely feels completely unstoppable. Now touching on that rooftop aspect even more, that does lead into my next main tip with Palpatine, which is to always stay on the move. Palpatine is one of those characters that pisses people off fairly easily, and one thing that I've found is that when you stay in one area for too long, a lot of enemies are going to come back over and over and try and get rid of you, so staying on the move is absolutely vital. Make sure to almost always be jumping around and using your lightning at the same time to damage enemies with less of a risk factor, and combine that with your dashes as well to try and get as much movement as you possibly can to avoid taking too much damage. Like I said before, Palpatine can go down fairly easily, and especially when you're on the ground standing relatively still, you can literally die within just a few seconds if you don't play it safe. So I'd almost recommend actually jumping every single time you attack, just to decrease the chances of enemies being able to actually land some quick shots. Now, similar to what I mentioned in the Luke hero guide, you do also need to have a backup plan if things do go south. Never get yourself into an area where you can easily be trapped or backed up into a corner, because without a means of escape, again, you will find yourself dead within just a matter of seconds. Touching on those Tatooine rooftops again, use those as a backup plan if you find yourself in trouble. If you always stick close enough to a building that you can quickly jump on the roof to get away, it is a very useful tip, and not only will it get you to relative safety, it can also allow you to reassess where the enemies are and then open up endless possibilities for flanking routes and stuff like that. Overall, play aggressively yet cautiously in terms of staying aware of your surroundings. Use that Chain Lightning as a finisher rather than using it first and then trying to attack, and just generally make the most of your abilities whenever possible, and you should be able to do very well with Emperor Palpatine. So that is going to be it for the Galactic Galactic Assault tips, now we're going to move on to some tips for the hero vs villain game modes. Now surprisingly, the cards that I use in these modes are the same ones I use in Galactic Assault, which isn't usually the case in these guides. However, I still just think that these are all generally the most useful cards all around, and so I personally don't really change these up very often at all. I'm not going to bother going through them all again, I'll just quickly show them all on screen to jog your memory, but there's really no point in adding an extra few minutes to the video just to reiterate cards that have already been mentioned, so feel free to pause and take a look if need be. Now, moving on to some tips for the hero game modes, and honestly, his playstyle in these modes is somewhat similar to Galactic Assault, although probably just with a bit more caution, as no matter who you're coming up against, they can pretty much all melt you if you give them the chance. For anyone who has seen my Bosk hero guide, I'd actually recommend playing in a similar fashion to Bosk in a way, making sure to keep on jumping like I mentioned earlier, as well as still attacking while you are jumping around like a madman. Also similar to Bosk, you'll find yourself getting a whole heap of assists because of how easily you can damage enemies, yet how easy it is for them to also escape with a little bit of health, only to get picked off just a few seconds later. Palpatine does seem to thrive in that way though, in that you'll often find yourself coming in first fairly easily without even getting too many kills of your own, simply due to the fact that you get in so many fights only for teammates to finish enemies off, and that is by no means a bad thing either. The difference between getting kills and assists in these modes is almost the exact same, to be honest, because as long as you and your teammates are taking out those enemies and killing the targets, then it really doesn't matter at all who is getting the kills, and like I said, you'll likely find yourself at the top of the leaderboards anyway. But honestly, other than that, there aren't really too many tips to go over that I haven't already touched on for Galactic Assault. Like I said, just keep on jumping when you attack, make the most of that forward dash to get some space between you and any saber users, and combine all your abilities together to quickly take out enemies or leave them damaged and running for your teammates to easily pick them off, like I said. Now, as for some heroes to look out for in these modes, the usual culprits of Chewie and Lando are the two main heroes that you need to keep an eye on due to their stuns and their ability to deal damage very, very quickly. I'd also say that Finn can be a real issue because of his Deadeye ability, as that's going to cancel out your jumping technique that I mentioned earlier, since he can just hit all his shots anyway, so he's definitely another one to look out for as well. To be perfectly honest, if you don't play it smart, pretty much any character can melt Palpatine, especially those like Han and Leia too, but if you do try and outsmart your enemies and make sure to keep on using that chain lightning to regen health, then for the most part you should be able to deal with most characters fairly well. Combine all of these tips with sticking close to your teammates and playing as a team, and you'll have no trouble at all with Palpatine in HVV and Hero Showdown. So that is going to be it for our Palps Hero Guide, guys. Hopefully some of these tips will help you guys out, as he is definitely a very fun character to play when you get the hang of him, as well as being arguably one of the best all-round characters in the entire game. If you did enjoy the video, then make sure to leave a like down below. Not only does it help support the channel, but it does also show me that you guys do want to see more of these updated hero guides. I am currently working on getting some more footage for the next hero guide, so I'm not 100% sure who will be next, but keep an eye on the channel because there is definitely plenty more on their way very soon. If you are new to the channel, then definitely feel free to subscribe and make sure to turn on your notifications so you don't miss out on any more Battlefront 2 guides or live streams. Thank you all so much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll catch you all in the next one.